First of all, thank you for the time.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this. I'm excited to talk to you today.
I appreciate it because it's about trust sometimes. Like, we don't know each other, you know, and usually I talk to people that I know, they're my old pals, and we just chit chat, you know, and you're someone that I have admired from afar, whether it's on a written page of a magazine interview, on a runway, on a big screen. Your intelligence really transcends all the medium. And I don't want to embarrass you, but I've been a big fan for a very long time.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's certainly, how can we go wrong from here?
And so, from Detroit.
Yeah, I grew up on the east side of Detroit. Yeah.
What does that mean from being from Detroit?
Detroit's an amazing place to be from, right? Because it's very real. It's the heartland of America, you know, and when I was growing up, you know, it was really during the 70s, and I went from seeing Detroit go from the working man's Hollywood, because we made the cars, we made the music that made the whole world move, you know, from Motown Records to the big three automakers. America, like, it was just a symbol of America. It was so glamorous. It was like American ingenuity, American engineering, American creativity. And, you know, then I saw the world completely evolve, where, you know, after the riots, after NAFTA, after so many things, you know, Detroit then became part of the Rust Belt, and it became abandoned. And, you know, people who, you know, most people were, when I was growing up, like, you know, my mother was a nurse, my dad was an electrician, they had both been in the Army. All the women and the men on the block had served in some capacity or another, and had civil servants jobs, and we were solidly middle class. You know, there was a real middle class neighborhood. And, you know, it was still back in analog days when kids played outside all day, and someone's mother or grandmother or auntie was always watching from some window somewhere, you know. So it was a real community. You know, Detroit's a tough place. Detroit's a creative place. It taught me so much.
What is that discipline of being from the Midwest, having parents that were formerly in the military or in the services? How did that define your work ethic?
I mean, it defines my life every day. From the moment I open my eyes, you know, I was taught, like, you get up, you make your bed, you clean your room, your clothes are pressed and laid out the night before, you're ready to go. And no one cares what your problems are, right? You're there to do a job, that's it. And you're there to serve the objectives of the client, period. So that's helped me a lot. And then, you know, just realizing that having that discipline, especially in a creative field where you don't necessarily work every day, and a lot of it is waiting, and a lot of it is going out for jobs, you know, presenting yourself over and over and over again for jobs, but having that discipline where, you know, you put on your uniform, you know, and whether that's the uniform of a model, or a soldier or a nurse or whatever, you know, the idea that, you know, you put on your uniform and you do it over and over again until you achieve success has been very helpful for me.
It almost seems like it's a tool also to separate yourself a little bit from rejection or the opinions of the peanut gallery or whatever it is, whether it, you know, of course, when you started to segue into modeling, how was that to come from hardworking middle class, middle America, Detroit, and as I understand, other professionals in your family from siblings, and then you're the one that goes into modeling. How was that?
You know, my mother was a creative. She was incredibly creative. She was one of those people, the only other person I know who has that kind of creative force in them in the same way as Isaac Mizrahi. Like, if my mother was not baking something, sewing something, cooking something, making some furniture, drawing something, reading something, whether it was like the Bible or philosophy, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or something like that, she would get what we now call depressed. She would get sad and quiet. So as long as she was being creative, right, my mother felt good. So her creative output was tremendous. Like she made all my clothes when I was a kid. She made a lot of the furniture in our house. So she loved and respected our creative drives. For my sisters, their creative drives were scientific. One of my sisters is an oncologist. The other one designs math curriculums. So, they're creative in that way. And my mother came from a generation that fought for freedoms that we take for granted, whether it's, voting or women in the workplace or the end of segregation. My mother fought for us to be whoever we wanted to be, whoever we could imagine that we could become. So, yes, it was a big leap. Yes, it was a lot different, especially going into the fashion world. Um, which is laissez-faire and loose and everything goes. It's much different from my military, like Baptist Christian background, because we went to church every Sunday and vacation Bible school. And, we read Bible verses daily in the house. So, and there was also a modesty to the way that we dressed and a modesty to the way that we expressed ourselves that it doesn't lend itself so much to fashion. But at the same time, understanding clothes, understanding, the incredible release of wearing something beautiful, right? Because on Sunday mornings, because most people where I grew up, my mother wore a uniform to work every day. My dad wore a uniform to work every day. Most people I knew wore some type of uniform. So on Sundays, that's when we could really express ourselves going to church.
I really understand that for so many different levels. I think about my relationship with my mom and my family. I come from more medical, scientific background. My dad's a psychiatrist. My mother
Where'd you grow up?
I'm from New Orleans and Baltimore.
Oh, nice.
Outside of Baltimore.
Nice.
And so a great part of me is very New Orleans, and also very Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Although I've been in New York for the majority of my life, I still feel like I'm a newbie here.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, my dad too, the first person I ever saw draw or say something creative, he would read Langston Hughes to us in bed before we go to sleep. Or he'd read science fiction books. And my mother would do
like what, Octavia Butler?
Yes, like Octavia Butler. And my father, they are of the boomer generation that was about striving and getting. My grandparents, I think, were in the Depression era generation, and that really instilled this idea of work, but then also kindness. And so I always say to people that if there's anything that's truly kind about me, it's because of my mother. My mother is truly, we would have to say a compliment to each other every day, to the siblings at the dinner table. We would know there's no television at the table. We'd have to memorize Bible verses, and then we put it in our cabinets. So when we open up the cabinet, and what I love so much about it is that they weren't creative people in their own right in their professional life, but they were so creative with how they're so open with the love. So I always say, if I ran away to clown college tomorrow, my mom would be like, great. Well, how do we make you the best clown?
Exactly.
How do we do it?
Exactly. Same kind of moms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when you moved into the world of fashion, and the world of fashion was at that time, in a sense, more exclusive.
Oh, it was closed. It was mysterious.
Yes. How do you reconcile that? The business is bigger. The charade is bigger. The scams are bigger. Everything about fashion is bigger. The beauty is bigger. The shows are bigger. The press is bigger. The social media didn't exist and all that stuff. So when you were there, you were in such a rare space where they would be this is the Black girl.
I feel like in a way, fashion is much smaller now than it was 40 years ago. Because when I started in the 90s, it was so exclusive, right? You could not get in to see a show. You could not get in a magazine. You could not publish yourself. You could not be seen on film. So people were hungry for those images. And, and they were all done in secrecy. Nobody had a camera where they were taking pictures, behind the scenes. No one was letting the clothes out that were being photographed. Nobody was telling every secret of how the makeup was done. Now it's like it's fashion has become, and this is apart from the creativity of designers, but it's become very commonplace, and it's become so accessible. And on the one hand, it's great that so many people can now self-publish and have their own point of view and be an editor and say, this is how I see fashion, this is how I live fashion. So going into it in the beginning, it was terrifying because I really didn't, I had no idea what happened behind the scenes. I had no idea how anything worked, from hair to makeup to walking down a runway. You just had to hope that you could get to New York or Paris or Tokyo or somewhere like that, London, Milan, have an agent see you somehow, if you could even figure out how to find the agent. And then hopefully, start a career as a model. Where now the barrier to entry is extremely low.
Wanting to do it, therefore
Mhm.
is I want it, therefore I am it. That's what I
Yes.
always say to people this era. But there's so much nostalgia for that era.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about like what event, like think about what an event a magazine was, and we would wait for, the new Vogue to come out. We would wait for the new Ebony to come out. And then you would get that magazine, and it was like going on a trip for a month. You would travel for a month with that magazine, um, and go over those images over and over and over again.
And when I think about, we in that era, and that is, I think, the time that when I would see you and I see you from afar, and it was so much mystery around, well, how did they do that? What is the tense? What does that mean? I had no idea what that
Hmm.
meant.
Hmm.
What did it, so what did it mean when they, well, wait a minute, well, who, how are they all flying on the same plane? Well, isn't that dangerous? As a kid in the suburbs, I didn't know anything.
Right?
And so then you see, like now, I think there's so much nostalgia on, oh, this was peak fashion era, or this is this, they look at Unzipped, or they'll look at
Hmm.
Isaac stuff, or they'll look at you on a Todd Oldham show or something, and they talk about it in this other. I don't. What do you think people aren't
There was
getting
also,
right about nostalgia of the 90s?
well, I don't think you can get the nostalgia wrong.
Okay.
I think, the other thing too was that there wasn't fast fashion. There wasn't fast fashion, right? So these clothes that we were seeing on the runways, they were dreams. They were absolute aspirational dreams. You're not going to see yourself coming and going in the knockoff version, 5 days later.
And then there was also this non-immediacy, non-immediate gratification. You shot, the film went away. You may be able to Polaroid it too, and you hope for the best, and then you see it later. Now everyone's there, the creative director, the art director, they all weigh in as it's happening in real time, and then they're shaping the image in real time or changing it in post. And I think that type of that less tactile. I don't know how to describe it other than we're not really seeing the pores in the same way.
Well, it's just it's instant. That's a big thing about it. It's instant, and the phone makes it instant. And there's less communication required between the team now, between model and photographer, between stylist and photographer, because you know get to see immediately what the image is, right? And then you can change anything in post. Where before it was such, you had to concentrate and distill the image down to perfection on film in the room at the time. And what you saw basically was what you got. And to retouch and to retouch an image was $10,000, which would be like spending $40,000 to retouch a picture now. So think about it.
I remember one time I did this project with Charlotte Rampling at one time, and then in that project with her, she pulls out this luggage and she says like, "Oh, this is helmets, images of me. Oh, yeah, I'm looking at a contact sheet." And the perfection on a crease, a line, a seam, anything was, or William Klein photos or things like this is way before. This is
Yep.
a whole other era before that level of precision, and also the number of exposures was just it wasn't endless numbers. It wasn't even 36. So I don't want to belabor this at all. I think it's interesting, but when you think about the time, and of course time passes, and is there any particular person or thing or moment that you miss?
The biggest thing that you take away from you with fashion is not the clothes, not the pictures, but your memories of being with people, right? And fashion was slow and it took a long time to make everything and to create everything. So you really lived like the teams that you worked with, they were like families. Um, I mean, even the sewing machines were different. So it took much longer for a designer to produce a garment for you. Yes, of course, there's things that I miss. I miss the Concorde. I miss Azadine. I miss doing Isaac's shows with him. I mean, we still talk to each other every day. I just saw him at the Carlisle the other night, actually doing his cabaret show. Um, I miss the fact that people could, actually be shocked by clothes, like when Gautier did things, when Comme des Garçons did things, people found them, shocking because it moved the needle so much in terms of fashion. Um, I miss magazines. I miss waiting for, a print magazine to come out. And, it was like a little Christmas every time one landed on your coffee table.
There at the As a little kid, I always say I was buried in the suburbs. I was like cul-de-sacs and
Yes.
you know PTA meetings and stuff. As a little gay boy in the neighbor, I would go to the local super fresh and get the magazine. I remember when Harper's Bazaar, when during the this Tiberius era, I didn't know what it meant, what it
Mhm.
was before, but somehow the the energy of the world focused on that newer logo,
Mhm.
and I would just stare. And I'm not this person anymore. I used to really study it so much that I could look at a picture and tell crew, and then I quiz myself on it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that it's not like that anymore. I'm not that literate with it anymore at all. And it's funny you mentioned the Concord. That's the thing. That's that ephemeral thing, like the smell, the person, the last, the champagne. That's what
Mhm.
I think that's what I was wondering what people aren't getting besides the fierceness of the night, and what are the human stories behind it that's interesting, you know. But then you're not only a model. The story doesn't stop there. The story doesn't even start there. And so when you go into acting and journalism, how do you approach those with that same level of discipline? Is there a through line?
Well, before I was a model, I was a writer, right? And, you know, I'm dyslexic. I'm very dyslexic. So learning to read and write was something for me it took me a long time. I was like about 9 before I was really reading. Um, and it was hard won. And then it was something that I told myself that no matter what, I'm mastering this. So I went on in high school to win like writing competitions and, edit the school newspaper and get published all the time. And then I got a scholarship to Parsons because I wanted to get to New York because I wanted to model. I just didn't know how to get into it. But I figured if I got to New York, that was step one, right? And the whole time I'm writing down my experience because also, you know, I came from a generation of parents, they didn't talk about their past. They didn't talk about their feelings. I knew very little about the adults in my life. They were loving, they were they were caring, they were authority figures, but like my mother's feelings.
I found my grandfather's love letters to my grandmother one time. Weird. You're a young guy trying to get with this girl. Wait, sorry.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing to know, the love story that made your life happen. I don't know that about my parents. So I was always somebody who journaled all the time. And also a big part of it was, constantly every day chipping away and developing that writing skill. And then suddenly I stepped through the looking glass into this world of fashion. And, you know, now we have social media, right? So we have permission to see whatever, wherever, whenever we want. But before that, there wasn't permission to see. You didn't see inside the, you know, fashion houses and Karl Lagerfeld's house and, Azzadine's kitchen whenever you felt like it. That was something that was really, off in Wonderland. And unless you wrote it down, there was no other way to really preserve it.
But you as a writer became not necessarily, I think I look at it as not the person keeping the journal of goings on of Seventh Avenue. More about this is the person behind it. This is my voice. This is my brain. This is how I want to interview this person. This is how I want to deliver to paper or magazine, or this is how
Mhm.
I want to present my brain to them. That's the way I looked at it. And then it also was a Black voice. And it also was a really smart voice. It was, I like to say it was fashionable, but it wasn't fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's also that part of me like my mother that needs to express myself creatively. And I was lucky enough to be around enough editors that they were like, from different magazines that I got invited to write it and at great
Be
places.
nervous.
Was I nervous? Of course I was nervous. I'm always nervous. I'm nervous now. Like I have Sergio Hudson show this afternoon. I'm already nervous because I care.
That's
Because I
great.
care. And I don't take it for granted that if you don't do a good job each time you go out there, that you'll have that I don't take it for granted that if you don't do a good job each time you show up, you might not be invited to show up again.
See, I have such social anxiety that nervousness is something that I always think that people don't get. My jitteriness, my internal voices and everything. I think to myself, if you really, once you really sort that out, then you'll be on a good. But it's great to hear. No, that's a part of it.
Yeah, of course, it's a huge part of it. And yeah, I have social anxiety. Of course I do. But, we didn't call it that when we were growing up. It was just like, you have butterflies in your stomach, but you're going to get over it if you want to have a life. So, whatever you need to do, figure it out and get out there because nobody's waiting for you.
But I think one of the things when I look at you from afar, I saw so much of your energy and your intelligence, whether it, again, was a modeling, whether you were even a correspondent or something like reporting on something. I think that you had this amazing intelligence that shined in. And you're a beautiful person. And to have that of your brain also shine through is really was always a feat.
Well, a lot of it is genetics, right? So, a good looking mom, good looking dad, smart mom, smart dad. And um, being academic was something that was always really prized and expected and necessary. And, um, I had a lot to live up to also because, I've got these two older sisters who are so smart who both went off to college when they were 16 years old. And, I come from a family of firsts. My mother was in the first generation of commissioned Black female officers in the Army. Um, Same generation as what's that movie that just came out?
Oh, the Tyler Perry?
The Sixes?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Sixes. So same generation of women. Both my parents served in the Pacific Theater. My aunt Hazel was also in my mother's sister was also in the Army, and she was the first Black female nursing professor at Columbia. Um,
you hear these stories. Like
Yeah.
I sometimes well up, and my mom was one of the first Black women that went to the nursing school at the University of Maryland. When she went there, she lived on campus. When she moved on campus, the girls moved out of the dormitories, so she lived alone on her floor for the first year she was there. And that fortitude of just being like, oh, I have to study.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why to this day, she is such a hard worker. There's some things going on where she just really focuses on her memory and retaining information and studying and reading, because that's always been something that has been almost, I would say, rescued her
Mm-hmm.
and gave her solitude and gave her strength. So,
Toni Morrison said, I think it was Toni Morrison who said that the purpose of racism is to distract you.
exactly.
So, if you feel like you're coming into a situation and you're at a disadvantage somehow, like maybe, you're too short, too tall, too fat, too skinny, too old, too young, too poor, too foreign, whatever, that's a distraction because none of that matters if you can do the job.
Exactly.
So just do the job.
Exactly.
Just do the job.
Well, the woman that you are today, how how do you think about, where does it now? You continue the work from activism to the voice of building a diverse future in the beauty industry. Like, what is your hope now that we're now in the present and looking towards the future, when we look at your role in that, your voice in that?
My hope looking toward the future, well, first of all, one of my biggest hope is for designers because I feel like it's harder and harder and harder for an independent designer to be able to build a company, to be able to put their individual vision out there and not have it immediately, you know, copied, resold, and they can't build a business because there's a cheaper, quicker version of everything that they have. And the reason why that also means a lot to me is because when you think about who makes clothes, women sew the clothes that we wear all over the world, right? So that affects their salary and it goes across the whole supply chain. So I would love to see fashion become more ethical in terms of its hiring and payment practices from the bottom up.
That's very important. I think that, as we talk about sustainability in whatever administration we're in, and whose life is important when they're making those garments. It's always like, oh, the people sewing it, are those lives valued? The people that are getting the runoff water from where the fabrics died, and they live and farm and drink from that reservoir, are their lives important? Or the most important people, the people that can pay the $9,000 for the button-down shirt or something? That's a part of it. And when you think about the chapter you're in now and the future, you think about, what are you most excited about?
What I'm most excited about? Well, I'm turning 60 in a couple days. So getting to do what I love to do for the rest of my life, right? And staying engaged and excited about fashion, about self expression, about meeting new people, working with new people, trying new things. I'm really understanding now more clearly than ever that the future is now. And I have that same kind of sense that I had, as a child, where every moment is new. There's every moment is leading to something else. Um, and I've also started a whole new chapter in my writing. I've started a column called Hot Mess on Substack. And that's
I love that
thank
name.
you. Well, because life is like the hot mess of it all, right? Um, you wake up every day and it's like, oh my God, how am I gonna pull, my hair together? How am I gonna get my outfit together? How am I gonna pull the kids together? How am I gonna run the house? How am I gonna get dressed? Where am I gonna take my career? Because everything's changing so rapidly, right? And there's so much, and technology is now moving us exponentially, right? So you want to stay, you want to stay relevant in the machine. And so, learning technology and moving with technology, and then realizing that, for so long when you're younger, you think you're supposed to become something else. You're supposed to become whatever, the image is of beauty or wealth or womanhood. But really, it's like what you're trying to become is the strongest version of yourself. So every day, what I'm trying to identify within myself are what are my strengths, right? So I know I'm a good listener. I know that I'm very patient. I know that I can communicate well. I know that I can untangle a long, complicated problem. And so, trying to work at those things every day and strengthen those things, that's what I'm excited about. I don't need to become something for someone else. I don't need to be, quote unquote, this year's model. I need to be the best version of me.
Where does that energy level come from? You could also be, you know what? I want my books. I want my dogs. I want my kids. I don't even engage in life. You're doing a Substack. You're involved. You're in the conversation. You're going to a fashion show tonight.
Yeah, I'm walking a
You're
fashion show
walking to a
tonight.
fashion
Yeah.
show tonight. My
Well,
apologies.
here's the thing. It's like I do want my books. I do want my, I do want my kids' pets because I'm kind of done with pets now. I've been chasing
All
after
right.
people and cleaning up after them, feeding them for a long time. So the thing is that you can't have, your books and your dogs and your vacation and your downtime without work because how are you going to pay for it, right? And also all those things like your kids grow up and they move away and they have their own lives. And so, even though the tremendous amount of mental and emotional energy that's expended on children every day, even when they don't live with you, you have to have your own organizing principle to the day because if you're a parent when your children grow up and they leave, right, it's really a moment because you've organized your whole day around them for 20 years. And then suddenly it's like, what's the organizing principle of the day?
Well, so it's almost, I'm not a parent, but but I talk to my sister quite a bit about her kids, and I hope she's not happy I put this in it. That she really focuses on her boys a lot. She loves them, and I say, Dawn, your job is to give them the best. You're exporting this product into the
Hmm.
world. It's a lot of shitty people running around this world, and you're putting together a well-rounded, thoughtful, sensitive, intelligent man into this world. That's the job. They can't stay there forever. So what is the plan for when they get they're in their late teens when they start to move out? What is the plan? You have to export this product.
Hmm.
So what is the plan in doing that? And, when you think about when you see other people around, like the young kids, what is your hope for them?
My biggest hope for them is that they can connect and that they can connect with one another. My biggest hope for them is that they will find employment because so many things that were entry level jobs like bank teller, um, uh, uh, answering phones, um, there's just so many jobs that now are automated, right? Um, so that kids can find decent entry level jobs. Even like what do you call it? Self checkout. I mean, I started my career when I was 13 years old as a cashier. I worked in an ice cream store. When I was in New York and I was discovered as a model, I worked as a cashier. And you still do see that somewhat, but more and more when you go into stores, there are fewer and fewer people that are working there.
Is writing different for you now than it was then
Yeah.
before?
Writing is way different now. It's way easier because technology, right? So, even like predictive text.
what's your process like? Are you like a notepad and a composition book and a pencil person? Or are you just like kind of a let's get all the thoughts out there?
Um, sometimes I'll jot down notes. Um, but lots of times, like, again, with technology changing, talk to text.
I recently used ChatGPT.
Hmm.
Not to write anything. I have to
Right.
write. I'm a creative. I don't know if you know. I'm a creative director at first, and I'm a
Hmm.
vice president there, and I do lots of creative output. But sometimes I want someone to almost talk to about an idea,
Yep.
and oftentimes I write the idea before it becomes a visual.
Hmm.
And then I'll say, okay, I want a man walking down a beach and a dog, and then like he's arm in arm with his partner, and then they look up at the sun. Whatever. I'll write like
Right.
a
Right.
story and I'll work with that. I use it as a partner, and they give it back to me and say, "Well, what if it was this way? Or what if?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, I don't like this." So it's easier also to hurt its
Hmm.
feelings than another creative person's feelings
Yes.
about that. I'm curious, have you ever tried that?
I haven't tried that,
Yeah.
but one of my girlfriends is trying to create a curriculum to teach about hairdressing. And she tried that because she was watching TV and she saw Martin Scorsese say that Chat GPT came back and gave him a good movie idea that he is now writing.
And it's also you can flush the idea and say it's terrible, or
Yeah.
something pops up, and then you're now a Substack, and so it's just like, okay, I'm thinking about talking about this, and it's just kind of like my junior assistant to help me something. I'm sure one day I'll be working for it, but it's one of those things. And have you found that your voice has changed? And your voice as a writer has changed.
I don't think my voice has changed so much as my perspective, because one of the things that I do a lot on my Substack is demystify this whole process of becoming beautiful, of becoming, you know, fashionable. And I think that that's something that went from this intoxicating, terrifying kind of struggle in the beginning to something that's now a much kinder way to think about, becoming beautiful, becoming fashionable, becoming the image of yourself that you have in your head and putting that out into the world.
Is that beauty to you?
Yeah. My latest column is called, the best thing anyone ever said to me about beauty. And it was actually Asni Elia. He said to me, anyone can become beautiful at any time. Sometimes it's just a question of the right haircut or a question of the right dress. But the point is that you have to keep trying. Now, it's how you try, right? That's the game. So if you start out thinking, well, I'm ugly, I don't have beauty, and it's my fault, right? Then you're already behind the eight ball. You're never going to win. But if you start out thinking, I have beauty, I just have to figure out how to find it. And that takes time because all beautiful things take time. Then you're in a position of wonder, you're in a position of kindness, you're in a much more childlike state where, you can find how you want to be and you can listen to yourself and get that out.
Also, get that a little bit earlier in our conversation when you talked about the creative outlets of trying, the creative outlets of output. That's beautiful. And that's where you pull from when beauty kind of comes from within, where you relate to your mother and being like this person who it was the most fulfilled when they were doing the most.
Hmm.
That's interesting. That's beautiful. Is it true that you learned French from Elia?
Yes. So when Azine first called me for a go see, he thought that I was Tunisian. So I got there and he was speaking to me in classical Arabic. And I was kind of like, no comprendo, daddy-o. And then he started to speak to me in French, and I didn't have any French at that point. I had only been in Paris a few weeks. But I had already been shot by Peter Lindbergh and Stephen Meisel. And then I went to see Azadine. And that was really those three things, those three go sees, the support of those three people really launched my career. Um, and then as Jean just said to me, well, and he just kept talking to me in French. And then he had his husband, Christophe, uh, say to me, because Christophe speaks English, Azadine would like you to come back tomorrow for lunch. And then I came back the next day for lunch, and we became family.
What a great way to learn it.
Yeah.
You know, I that's when I realized I've lost all my brain cells. I've used them up. When I tried, I was okay with Spanish, and then somewhere along the lines, I decided to study German, and that's when I discovered that this sponge is full.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'm not going to be a polyglot.
Well, also, to speak another language, I feel like you have to be highly incentivized. If you don't learn it as a child, you have to be highly incentivized to do it, because especially for people like us, you're kind of robbed of your intelligence at the gate. We're so dependent on expressing ourselves through language that when you can't sound as funny or as witty or as intelligent as you're used to, forget it. But I bet if you got a great job in Germany.
You do so much. And how do you balance family, career, creativity, new endeavors?
It's really hard to have a work-life balance, and I'll tell you why, because, you bought your children here, right? And so it's hard to deny them whatever it is that they need. And, once you have a baby, children require everything that every adult in the room can give them, right? Knowledge, affection, time. So it's hard. It's hard sometimes to put enough energy into just yourself, right? So usually as a woman, you end up splitting everything between your family and work and erring on the side of your family, right? And that's just how it is. But, you don't have your children with you for very long. One of the things that I wish that someone had told me at the very beginning of my career was, one, figure out exactly why you're going to kill yourself for this, like what you're going to build with the money that you're making, right? Because to be successful in a career that's highly paid, um, the competition is fierce, and everybody wants it, and you better be on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you're not working, you better be working toward work, right? So you better be in the gym, you better be learning a language, you better be making sure that your body and your mind are straight and healthy. Um, So, one, I wish that someone had told me, make a clear financial plan, take a business course, decide what you're going to put your money on, or what you want the money for, so that on the days that you're experiencing rejection, when you feel like giving up, when you're working horrible jobs, right? Know that you're not just doing this to do it. You're not doing it for ego. You're not doing it because you have nothing else to do. You're doing it because you want to buy a house. You want a 401k. You want to retire. You want to have time with your children when they're tiny and they're at home. You want to have time with your husband on vacations. You want to be able to help your family out if they need something. So, really framing what you're doing in terms of building a life rather than, seeing yourself up in lights, which is part of it. But the ultimate goal is to bring that money home and build a life. Um, and I think the other thing that I really wish I had known was, time goes by as fast as the fog of your breath on a mirror. And each day is like special. And, I think of all the people I was great friends with, Azadine Alaya, Karl Lagerfeld, Oribe, Kevin O'Coin, my agent, Neil Hamill. Really, it sounds like a long time when you're young, but once you start your career, you get about 30 years with the people who you love and who are special to you. And then, you know, they transition, they pass on because they're only here on loan from God, and then they go back. You know, so just know that like your biggest and most precious memories are going to be of the time that you spent with people. And it's fast.
Very fast. I think about that all the time. I think that even with familiar family relationships, that forget mother, son, nephews, nieces, we happen to be on this plane together, crossing paths, and we better take advantage of this singular moment.
Yeah.
I really want to thank you for sitting here, hanging out with us for a bit, and sharing about your story and your future. Because I'm a huge fan. I hope a new friend. I really like you. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate having this moment with you.
All right, cool. All right. We're just gonna do a last shot, and that's it. I have a little thing for you. A friend of mine from Detroit named Kevin Harry. Anyway, he's from Detroit. He was like, you gotta give her this hat.
Okay.
So I'll give it to you. This is Detroit.
okay.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you. I appreciate the
Thank
time. Come on.
Aw.
Thanks. All right. Love this talk.
All of our-
Oh, absolutely. Nervous for a show. That's great.
I'm nervous for a show. Yeah.
You
Nervous
want to water or anything too?
You know, and the other thing about being nervous for a show, right, is the designer has now worked, sometimes upwards of a year on whatever it is that they're going to have you wear.
Yeah.